Hello everyone. We are continuing with our series titled Studies in the Book of Proverbs. And in this video, we are going to focus on a topic called Instructions to Children. Now, in our previous videos, we have noticed the fact that Proverbs 1 through 7 are chapters in which a father is advising his son or sons. In other words, Solomon wants to teach us that wisdom is first taught at home. And therefore, there are lots of instructions for children. We are going to do this video in 5 sections. Number 1, we are going to talk about instructions to young children about how they are to respond to parental advice and counsel. Number 2, we are going to talk about instructions to grown-ups or adults and their relationships with parents. Number 3, we're going to talk about instructions to children about different kinds of people and how to relate to them. Number 4, we're going to talk about instructions to children on constantly pursuing wisdom. And number 5, we're going to talk about instructions to children about knowing God and relating to God. Now, given that this is a vast topic, we are going to do the first 3 topics in this video, and we are going to reserve the final 2 topics for the next video. So let's begin by looking at section 1, in which we are going to talk about instructions to young children about how they are to respond to parental advice and wisdom. Now, when I read these verses, I want us to pay attention to the action words, the verbs. What are the children actually being told to do in these verses? Let me first bring 4 passages from the book of Proverbs, all from the first 7 chapters to us. First of all, Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8. Children are told, "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching." So children are being told that your father would instruct you, your mother would teach you. It is your duty to listen carefully to what they have to say. And it is your responsibility not to forsake the teachings and the instructions that you receive from them. Chapter 2, verse 1. "My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you." So the father is speaking to the son and he is telling him to accept his words. In other words, pay attention, receive, think about it, accept my words and store up my commands within you. In other words, you are to remember them. You are to make a conscious and deliberate attempt to store up the instructions that you get from your father, from your mother. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 to 3. "My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart." A father is instructing the son about binding something around his neck and writing something on the tablet of his heart. Now, what exactly is a child to bind around one's neck? What is the child supposed to write on the tablet of his heart? It is the teaching that he has received from the father. It is the commands that he has received from his parents. Now, when you say bind it around your neck or write it on the tablets of your heart, it is language used to explain that these are things that are to be always with you. You are to digest these things. You are to internalize these things. These things should be as if they are written on your heart with deep impressions. They have been imprinted there and therefore cannot be removed. We are talking about the instructions that are given to young children about how they are to respond to parental advice and so on. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. "Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. For I too was a son to my father, still tender and cherished by my mother. Then he taught me, and he said to me, take hold of my words with all your heart, keep my commands, and you will live. What is going on here? A father is speaking to his son about his own experiences. And he is saying that when he was just a child, his father would give him instructions and advice and counsel and wisdom, and his father asked him to hold on to it. And therefore his life has turned out to be well. And therefore he's advising his son that you are to also hold on to the teachings that I am giving you. And indirectly, he is also creating a tradition here, and he's asking his son to pass on these kinds of teachings to his son when the time comes for it. Now, these are just 4 sample passages from the first 7 chapters. You would find this theme being repeated again and again. Children are told to listen, do not forsake the teachings, accept the instructions, store up my commands, do not forget, keep my commands in your heart, bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, pay attention, do not forsake, listen, and so on. So, different instructions being given to young children about parental advice and wisdom and how to relate to it. Now, I want us to also now pay attention to Solomon and his advice to grown-ups, adult children, and how they are to respond to their older parents. Now, I have a few verses that I would like to read in that regard. The first one comes to us from the book of Proverbs, chapter 30, verse 17. We read there, the eye that mocks a father, that scorns an aged mother, will be pecked out by the ravens of the valley, will be eaten by the vultures. What are we talking about? The child has grown up, he is an adult now, or she is an adult now, and they have aging parents. But there would be some people who with their eyes mock their father and scorn their aged mothers. And Solomon is saying that if you despise your parents, you are grown up, you may not need them as much as you needed them during your childhood, but if you despise them, if you scorn them, he says, your eyes will be pecked out by the ravens of the valley and will be eaten by the vultures. That is just colorful language to say that it will not be good for you to despise your parents in that manner. Let me take you to Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 22. Now, this is also a passage which says, listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. You know, when people grow up, they think that they don't need their father and mother anymore. But Solomon is advising grown-up children, adult people, listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. In other words, have the same respect for her while she was young, you were young, and so on. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 20. This is another instruction to grown-up children. If someone curses their father or mother, their lamp will be snuffed out in pitch darkness. If you curse your father, or if you have ill will towards your mother, if you curse your mother, we are told that your lamp will be snuffed out in pitch darkness, which is colorful language again to tell us that we would be in a very dark situation. We would be in a situation where we don't have any light and we can't see anything. It will not be good for you, is what is being told. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 26. Whoever robs their father and drives out their mother is a child who brings shame and disgrace. You know, when you grow older, you are in a situation where you can rob your father and you can drive out your mother. You can send them out of your house and they have to fend for themselves. And we are told that if we do that, we bring shame and disgrace upon ourselves. I have two more verses in this section, one which speaks about a foolish son and another which talks about a wise son. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 25, we are told, "A foolish son brings grief to his father and bitterness to the mother who bore him." So if you grow up to be a wicked person, to be an evil person, you are bringing grief to your father and you're bringing bitterness to your mother, is what is being told here. In contrast to that is the wise son, chapter 10, verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon. "A wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son brings grief to his mother." In other words, in the first 7 chapters, while Solomon is advising young children to pay close attention to the parental advice and instruction that they receive, in section 2, Solomon is pointing out to us that even grown-ups, adults, are required to honor their father and mother and to bring joy and comfort to them in their old age. Now we come to section 3 of this video, and we are going to look at instructions to children about how to relate to people. Now in this section, I'm going to show us that little children from the first 7 chapters of the book of Proverbs are instructed on how to relate to wicked people, how they are to relate to people in society, how they are to relate to people who are their neighbors, and also how they are to relate to people of the opposite sex. Now let me bring some passages to our attention in this matter. First, Proverbs chapter 1, verses 10 to 19. Now I'm not going to read this passage for us because we have discussed this passage in greater detail in the previous video. But the instruction that is given by the father to the son is, do not bend to peer pressure. Do not fall for the glittering promises of sin, because people who walk in these wicked ways will ultimately reach sorrow and pain and death. So here is the father advising the son on how he should relate to wicked people. I have a similar piece of instruction from chapter 4, verses 14 to 17. Again, how to relate to wicked people. "Do not set foot on the path of the wicked, or walk in the way of evildoers." Who is speaking to whom? The entire chapter 4 is instructions by father to a son. So our father is saying, do not set your foot. Do not even think of going on the path of the wicked or walking in the way of the evildoers. Don't go there. Verse 15, "Avoid it, do not travel on it, turn from it, and go on your way." In other words, if you're not there, completely avoid it. If you happen to be in the way of the wicked, turn away from it and go on your way. For the wicked people, for they cannot rest until they do evil. They are robbed of sleep till they make someone stumble. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. Why should you not associate with wicked people? Why should you not walk in the way of the wicked people? Because they cannot rest without doing evil. They cannot sleep without causing someone to stumble. The food that they eat is the bread of wickedness, and the wine that they drink is the wine of violence. Your rest, your sleep, your bread, your wine is not to come from such contexts. In other words, the father is telling the son, avoid the wicked people and also the ways of the wicked people. Now, how are you to relate to people in society? The father has advice for his son in that matter as well. Chapter 3, verse 27 and 28. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to act. Do not say to your neighbor, come back tomorrow and I will give it to you, when you already have it with you. The father is telling the child that you will grow up to have position and power. You would have influence over people, and you would have the capacity to help people. And when you have the capacity to help people, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due. In other words, do everything possible given your position and your power to do good to people. And do not say to your neighbor, come back tomorrow and I will give it to you, when you already have it with you. If you have something that your neighbor needs and you know it needs to be given to your neighbor, why would you postpone doing that good for tomorrow? Do the good that you can do today itself. There are also instructions on how to relate to one's neighbor. Look at the same chapter, chapter 3, verses 29 and 30. Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse anyone for no reason when they have done you no harm. In other words, you are not to accuse your neighbor falsely. That's one of the 10 commandments, is it not? We are to love our neighbor as ourselves. That's a commandment that is found in the Old Testament and in the words of Jesus as well. And so we are to love our neighbor, we are to respect our neighbor, and we are to treat them well, just like we want ourselves to be treated. The golden rule, the words of Jesus again. Point is, the Father is instructing the Son as to how he is to relate to people in society. One final passage and then we will stop. In fact, we are not going to read the verses for this because we have the entire chapter 5, entire chapter 7, a few verses in chapter 2, and plenty of verses in chapter 6 that a father is advising the son on how to relate to people of the opposite sex. When temptations of sexuality come, how are you to respond to it? Again, is a piece of advice that the father is giving to the son on responding to or connecting with the people of the opposite sex. So, since we have already discussed that in 3 videos, I'm not going to take time to discuss that right now. But the point is that in the book of Proverbs, there are plenty of instructions to children, and in this video, we have discussed 3 of them. Number 1, instructions to young children about how they should respond to the advice and counsel that come from their parents. Number 2, instructions to grown-up children or adults and their relationship with their parents. And number 3, instructions to children about how to relate to people in society. We are not done with instructions to children. We will have a part 2 to this as well, and that's coming up in the next video.